Hello everyone! Today I will explain the recently released movie Salem's Lot 2024, which is the remake of most influential vampire miniseries 1979 Salem's Lot. This movie is based on Stephen King's horror novel. And at the end of the story, I will explain the original ending of the novel. At the beginning of the movie, a city named Jerusalem's Lot is shown. Businessman named Richard Streaker came to live in this Jerusalem city from London. Streaker has opened a new shop of antique materials here. Streaker asks Mr. Snow for help. He says that a big box will come at 6 p.m. There are many old materials in that box, so he asks for delivery that box at his house. In Jerusalem, Streaker lives. The house is named Marsten House. Marsten House is popular as the most haunted house in the city because a man did suicide in this house. Ben goes to keep the box Marsten House with Snow driver. The driver said, "I'm scared here. My grandfather said that Hobie Marsten killed his wife and shoot himself in this house. Because he was worshipping Satan, he shoot his wife and himself." Snow says, "These are false stories." Then when you want to keep the box falls out of your hand. As a result, one corner of the box breaks and soil comes out from there. They started thinking that there should not be soil here. There should be materials of old days here. They started to get out without thinking about anything else. Barlow came out of the box exactly then. Those who have read Salem's Lot novels may know that Barlow is an ancient, powerful vampire. That means this box was not just any box. It is a coffin. Streaker lied to them. As Barlow came out from the box, hypnotizing Snow, driver says from behind, "We should get out of here now." Snow regains her senses and they leave. In the next scene, a book writer named Ben Mears drives into Jerusalem City and looks at the Marsten House. Then an officer interrogated him. Ben said, "He came to this city after many years. He spent his childhood in this Marsten House. He came for the inspiration of his book." Then Ben goes to the real estate to rent a house, and there is a girl named Susan who was reading Ben's book. Susan doesn't recognize Ben at first. Susan says, "You look familiar." Ben says, "How is the book?" Susan says, "The book is so wonderful that it doesn't want to end." Then Ben wants to know the location of the house to rent. That time Susan's boss Larry comes out. Ben asks him who lives in the Marsten House, because he saw someone inside the house when he arrived. Larry says someone bought that house. Ben asks who bought it. Larry points out his store opposite. Susan asks why he wants to know about Marsten House. Ben says, "I spent my childhood in that house." Susan says, "Oh, so that's why you looks familiar." Larry asks his name. He says Ben Mears. Susan is happy. "Oh, I was reading your book and then she rented an apartment for Ben." We then see elementary school friends. They are Mark, Ralph, and Ralph's older brother Denny. Suddenly a bad boy comes and punches Mark. Mark stood up and shook his hand. A teacher named Burke comes and stops their fight. Then the three of them go to each other's house, but Streaker follows them. Scene changes, showing Ben, where he is sitting in the library researching about the Marsten House. Susan comes to the library with her mom Anne. Susan is being a friend of Liberian girl. So Liberian says, "Ben's parents died in a car accident when he was young." Then Susan pointed for Ben to go for a drive with her. On the other hand, Ralph and Denny meet Streaker on their way home and he wants to give them a lift. Ralph and Denny say, "No, our mom says don't get into a stranger's car." Then they go through a forest and take a shortcut to going home. Surprisingly, Streaker suddenly kidnaps Ralph from behind. Denny turns around and has no idea how Ralph disappeared. Meanwhile, Ben and Susan go to watch a movie. Ben says that his parents died in a car accident when he was young, and Susan tells him that when she was in Boston, she came here for her father, but Susan's father died 2 years ago. So she wants to go back to Boston but can't leave her old mother alone here. In another scene, Streaker takes Ralph to the Marsten House and sacrifices Ralph to Barlow. Barlow continues to eat Ralph's blood. Then it appears, Father Callahan is released from prison. Constable Parkins tells him that a boy named Ralph cannot be found in the area. Father asks, "What initiative has been taken to find Ralph?" Constable says the research team is working and what I should do, I am going to retire. Meanwhile, many people in the area are looking for Ralph, including Ben and Teacher Burke. Constable Parkin asked to stop the investigation because they were not getting the support from the police. Next, Ben drops Susan at her house while Susan's mom Anne is watching them hidly. Susan says, "My mom might not like my friendship with you." The scene changes, showing Denny thinking about his brother Ralph in his room, when he hears Ralph's voice. Ralph calls him out to play. Denny goes outside and finds Ralph's mouth organ down, then someone suddenly attacks Denny. Denny is then seen at the hospital. Dr. Cody said that Denny has anemia. The amount of blood in his body has decreased a lot. Dr. Cody says Denny is anemic because he is deficient in vitamin B12, so his body is not producing new red blood cells. He has no hemoglobin at all. But we as a viewer know that Denny was bitten by vampire. After a while, Denny tells his mom that he is thirsty. When his mom told the nurse to bring water, she came back and saw that he was drinking direct blood from the blood bag which given to Denny. Seeing this scene, Denny's mom starts screaming and the doctor comes and declares Denny dead. The next day at Denny's funeral, father assigns a boy named Mike to bury Denny. Mike hears Denny's voice while burying Denny at night. She asks for help to get out of the coffin. Mike is very scared, and he opens the coffin and sees that Denny's body is there. So who spoke? Mike goes back to his work when Denny comes from behind and attacks Mike. Then Burke is seen sitting at the bar and Mike appears. Mike looks unusual. He says, "Is he sick?" Burke asks, "Since when did the body deteriorate?" Mike said after the funeral. Burke asks whose funeral he was at, but Mike can't remember whose funeral he did. Burke then takes Mike to his house. Burke notices that Mike has bite marks on his neck. Burke understands why Mike is sick. Burke immediately calls out to Ben. Ben was there with Susan and they were having an affair. Burke tells them Mike has become vampire. Ben doesn't believe this. He goes up and checks on Mike. Mike's body has completely cooled down and the bite marks on his neck are gone. According to Burke, if a person dies after being attacked by a vampire, it takes a few minutes or a day for the person to become a vampire and the vampire bite marks disappear. Then the constable and Dr. Cody does check on Mike's body. According to Dr. Cody, Mike and Denny died of anemia. Burke says there is a connection behind Mike and Denny's death. Scene shifts to Mark. Mark hears Denny's voice as he sleeps. Here we see the iconic scene of the cult classic scene that was in the cult classic miniseries of Salem's Lot. Denny asks Mark to come with him from outside the window. That Barlow would meet him. Mark is a very smart and intelligent boy. He understands that it is a vampire. Because Denny died earlier, Mark goes to close the window, but Denny hypnotizes Mark, and Mark unconsciously opens the window. Denny comes in. He attacks Mark. Fortunately, Mark regains consciousness. Mark hits Vampire Denny in the face with his glowing cross. Vampire Denny leaves in fear and burning pain. Mark immediately closes the window and begins researching vampire rules. Meanwhile, Mike has become fully vampire and attacking Burke. Mike tells Burke that Barlow wants to meet him. Burke chases him with his glowing cross. Mike tricks into attacking him, and that is why Burke is injured. But he can't do anything for the glowing cross. In another scene, Dr. Cody's nurse tells Denny's mom that he's dead and Denny's dead body has disappeared from the hospital. After knowing this, Dr. Cody goes to Burke's house and finds him injured and asks who did it. Burke tells Dr. Cody about what happened to Mike that night. Ben, Susan, Burke, and Dr. Cody continues to match all the equations. Burke said since Richard Streaker came here, Ralph, Denny, Mike died of symptoms. And now he makes in a good relationship with Susan's mother. In fact, there is a single hand behind it. That is Barlow. Burke also says, we need to open Denny's grave to be sure about this vampire, whether that Denny's body is there. Dr. Cody says there will be no need, because Denny's mom died with the same symptoms and his body is still at the hospital. If this vampire story is true, then Denny's mom will become a vampire. Then they go to the hospital morgue and wait for Denny's mom to turn into a vampire. Susan says, if Denny's mom is really a vampire, how do we fight? Needless to say, Denny's mom becomes a vampire. She started attacking everyone. Ben and Susan make a cross with 2 sticks, but it doesn't work. Then, when they start praying, the cross starts to glow, but the cross is broken due to the fight. The vampire attacks Cody and bites her. Susan from behind prays with a broken cross, then drives the vampire away by glowing cross. Dr. Cody said quickly to give rabies injection out of her bag. After giving her the rabies injection, Susan tested him with a glowing cross and found no effect. So this time Dr. Cody survived. In the next scene, Mark goes alone to Marsten House to kill Barlow. After going there to meet with Burke. Basically, Burke was there too. In the meantime, Streaker comes and locks them out. Burke and Mark looked for a way out. Meanwhile, Barlow comes out of the coffin. Burke and Mark find a way out through the upper floor, but there are no stairs. Burke somehow lifts Mark up, but Barlow comes in and attacks Burke. Streaker comes in and grabs Mark, holding him there. But Mark knocked out Streaker and escaped. On the other hand, Ben, Susan and Dr. Cody goes to Burke's house to visit him, but they see vampires. They realize Burke is no longer alive. He has become a vampire. Then everyone goes to church. Father tells them that everyone needs to be here at this time. At that time, Mark goes to church to take holy water. He tells everyone, it's Barlow's work, and I finished Streaker, but now Barlow is left. And now to kill Barlow, Father takes them all to Marsten House. Barlow stays there. Burke attacks them there. Burke attacks Ben. Ben kills Burke with a wooden stick and escapes. They all think that in order to save everyone in the town, everyone must come together to bring the church. Then they go to town and see how quiet everything is. No one has received the delivered milk and newspaper. They are all lying outside. Dr. Cody meets Parkins. Parkins is leaving town because there is no way out. Dr. Cody tries to convince Parkin to not leave the town and fight the vampires to make the town safe, but Parkin refuses and leaves, but he also killed by the vampires. In another scene, Susan Ben goes to pick up Susan's mom, Anne. Anne is very angry to see Ben, and she wants to talk to her daughter alone. Ben stood at a distance and listened to them. At that time, Ben notices that Anne is not visible in the mirror. That means Anne is now Barlow's servant. When Ben tries to be safe Susan, but a vampire bites her. Ben takes Susan to Crutch to save her. Scene shift. Father Callahan and Mark go to Mark's house to take Mark's parents, but his parents don't believe anything. Then sounds come from outside. Mark's dad goes to check, and suddenly in Father's hand cross glows. That means there's going to be a vampire attack. Mark's dad is killed by the vampire. Barlow also bites Mark's mom. Father asks Mark to run away from here, and Father wants to fight Barlow with a glowing cross. But the father cannot weaken Barlow. Of course, Barlow being the master of vampires will not be easy to beat. Barlow also kills Father, and Mark takes shelter in a treehouse that suffers a lot. On the other hand, Ben goes to church with Susan too late. Susan's reaction starts as she enters the church. The cross of the church starts to glow. Ben told Dr. Cody is to give an injection of rabies, but Dr. Cody says the rabies injection won't work anymore because Susan has already changed. Better than you kill her with a wooden stick. But it's not possible for Ben, but then Susan runs away. As Ben runs outside behind Susan, here several vampires surround Ben. That means everyone in town has become a vampire. Dr. Cody loudly called for Ben to come inside the church. Ben ran to go inside the crutch and was attacked by a vampire. Ben somehow killed the vampire and came back to the crutch alive. Ben told Dr. Cody that Susan's mom is now Barlow's new servant. Then Ben and Dr. Cody goes to visit Father at Mark's house, but he is dead. Ben found a letter written by Mark, saying that he is now going to kill Barlow. Next, Mark goes to Streaker's antique shop to find Barlow, but again Denny attacked him there. Mark stabbed Denny with a wooden stick. Denny's marvel eyes turned black. Finally, Denny died. Mark takes revenge on Ralph's death by killing Denny. In the next scene, in the road, Ben and Dr. Cody meets Mark. They say, "Have you got Barlow?" Mark says no, but revenged Ralph's death. Ben tells Mark, "We have to leave the town. No one lives in this town." Mark says, "No, I will not go anywhere without revenging my parents' death." Then Ben notices there are no cars on the road. He says, maybe the vampire has taken shelter inside the car. They then go to the open cinema theater to check Susan's car. Ben finds Susan on the deck of the car. They stay on the deck of the car to avoid the sunlight. Dr. Cody says, to kill Susan. But that's not possible by Ben, so Dr. Cody goes to kill Susan herself. That time Anne shoots her and Dr. Cody died instantly. As Anne starts shooting at everyone, Ben somehow hides behind a car and requests Mark to save himself. But Mark is a brave boy. He would never leave Ben in such danger time. That time it was getting dark, but the sun hasn't set yet. There is a big board, so it's dark up to certain places. Due to the darkness, the vampire crawls out of the car's deck and attacks Ben. Mark then cleverly drives a car over the big board and at the same time runs over the car Anne. Finally, he killed her. Cause of the breaking of the board's sunlight to fall on the vampires. That's why all the vampires burn to sunlight and become into ashes. Ben and Mark say Barlow is still alive. They have to find him. Then they notice a van. By checking it, the first movie scene of that coffin is found there. They took down the coffin and tried to open it. Ben looks for tools to open the coffin. The sun sets before opening the coffin. This causes Barlow come out of the coffin. Ben and Mark split in two to escape from Barlow. But Ben is attacked again by the vampire Susan. But finally Ben kills Susan with a wooden stick. On the other hand, Mark stuck to such a place where Barlow almost killed him. Then Ben inserted a wooden stick into Barlow's mouth from behind, and then stabbed Barlow's heart. Finally Barlow dies. Then Ben and Mark leave town with a broken heart because there is no reason to stay there anymore. And the movie ends here. So, here you may have the question, is Barlow really dead? And can Barlow back again? In my opinion, Barlow at least dies here because his glowing marvel eyes become black. Maybe Barlow stopped for a while. I saw in the movie of Dracula Untold there the vampire dies in the sunlight, but when the ashes are mixed with human blood, the vampire comes back to life. Barlow may get a stick out of his heart here, or by any chance if he gets blood Barlow will come back to life again. In the original novel story, Ben and Mark return a year later to find that Barlow is not fully finished, and that many more vampires are hiding in different parts of the city. So they came again, set fire to the forest in the city, so that no more vampires survive. I hope you like my explanation. If you have any confusion, and if you want a recommended movie for explanation next, comment on it. Thank you so much and please subscribe.